It's true, we live in the so-called information age, and we can access a gazillion pieces of data, at the click of a mouse, and that this has created a situation where, you could say, I would say up until mid-century, or even somewhat later, the problem, in a sense, was proximity and access to information, right? You had to be on Wall Street in order to get the news first. That gave you a competitive advantage that, in that case, literally translated into a monetary advantage. Or these sort of old stories about who had the taller lookout so they could see the ships coming into the harbor so they could get, down to trade first, right? So in a very literal sense, proximity and access to information had a competitive advantage. Today, all of that information is immediately accessible. And so the problem becomes a different one. The problem is how to filter the information, how to conceptualize the information, give it a shape and a form in a way, because you have to make a decision about which information out of all of this information counts. So the important distinction today is not access to information, but really decision making about which information matters. And again, I think in a certain way, this is something that as architects we're trained very well to do. We're trained to synthesize and filter information and to spatialize it, even use graphic tools to give it a shape and give it a form. And when you give it a shape and give it a form, then you can understand how it works. So that's a little bit what that's about. And look, I think part of that is to say that there's a difference between information and knowledge, and so at times the sort of slower way of accessing information through books and the durability of the book, the accidental character of what book is filed next to what book, can still, I think, give us that sense of just navigating that information landscape in a different way. I just had a chance, was in a conference in Japan, and I revisited one of my favorite films, which, ostensibly has a kind of connection with Japan, but it's this beautiful film by Chris Marker called Saint Soleil, where at the very beginning he quotes a passage of T.S. Eliot, which I can't reproduce from memory, but something like time is always space and space is always time, and says that, and again, let me see if I can get this right, I think he said that the great problem of the 19th century was space, the great problem of the 20th century is coming to terms with different concepts of time. So, and this is absolutely what the Stephen Kern book is about, is really how in early modernity, really, you could say it was the friction between the moving away from the 19th century concept of space, embracing 20th century concepts of time, that resulted in so many of the important experiments of the avant-garde. Cubism being the most obvious example, but futurism, really all of the heroic movements of the early 20th century had to do with rethinking the space-time problem. The degree to which I think anybody growing up in this country is shaped by the American landscape, and again, Jackson just sort of brilliantly captures that all of the contradictions really of the American landscape. And of course, I guess what I would say is this: is that landscape, in a sense, and that notion of that was sort of introduced under postmodernism of the sense of place, really as a counter, if you will, to the sort of mobility of the 20th century. And I think what's, in a way, brilliant about Jackson is he doesn't give us a kind of conservative sense of place as all about history and tradition in the past, but he's very aware of mobility and the expansiveness of the American landscape. And so it allows, I think, to connect to a much richer notion of landscape because in fact, and this is the root of my fascination with landscape, is that landscape is always concerned with time and change over time and evolution. A landscape changes and evolves over time in ways that buildings don't necessarily, or only do in relatively minor ways. You can talk about weathering, you can talk about buildings that get revised programmatically, but it's really in cities and landscapes where we see this dramatic evolutionary change over time. But this is obviously an important book to me. I think not only just because of a kind of long-standing fascination with detective fiction. One of the things about detective fiction, of course, is that the story in detective fiction always unfolds in two directions at once. The narrative line moves forward, but then the detective is always reconstructing the past, and so you have these sort of interesting times that are passing one another, and nobody does that more brilliantly than Matsumoto. And then, of course, I was obviously attracted to the book, found the book in the first place because of the title, Points and Lines. I had already determined that my book would be called Points and Lines, but with a plus sign rather than the word and. And I can't remember, an Amazon search or something got me to this book with the same title. And then, of course, the pleasure of discovering that it was all about diagrams and timetables, and the fit was just really too good to miss. Well, I'm a sucker for any book that has maps and diagrams in it. And this is a book which is full of maps and diagrams. And of course, it's all about time and space, and train connections, and different ways of sort of working with this system of trains and planes and schedules, and that's in the end the mystery is solved, having to do with a particular trick with the whole timetable. Exactly. For me, it's just this kind of sense of working from clues and traces, and the degree to which you could also say that a detective is like a psychoanalyst, that a detective is working from these fragmentary clues and creating a story that makes sense. And I think that's very much what we do as architects. I mean, we have a series of clues, we have a series of intuitions, we have a series of givens for a project, and it's our job in a way to make a story that holds together. You could give different people the same clues and they would tell a different story. And what counts in the end of the day is not whether that story is true or false, but how closely it fits the facts and how it holds together internally.